I'm going to ask that everybody mute themselves. And let me just offer you a warm welcome to say we're so glad to see you. I'm Nancy Rankin, and this is Bonnie Burkett. And Bonnie and I have spent the last year putting this webinar together, and we feel like tonight's the birthing of the baby in some ways. What we really hope, though, is that this is going to be a good training for you as Staff Parish Committee members. And so first and foremost, let me say thank you for saying yes when your church's nominations ask you to serve in this way. We really believe that this is one of the most important ministries that you could do for your church, is to serve and to serve well on this committee. You're going to be watching a webinar that we put together, and it has a lot of information. So do not feel like you have to take a lot of notes. Just relax, enjoy it, have a refreshment, take a break if you need to, because this webinar, the reason we produced it this way is so that it would be available to you from now on after this training for other members of your committee. Anytime you need to come back and look at it and be refreshed, or to ask a particular question and go back, let's look at that again, it's going to be available to you. So like I said, it's a lot of information, but don't feel like you have to absorb it in one sitting. I don't think anybody really could. But we wanted it to be comprehensive, because one of the things that we felt as we began to do this is a lot of things are there people don't know about. So it's centered around relationships, and the kind of relationships that we hope that first you'll cultivate with God and with one another as you work together as a team, with your pastor and any paid or contract staff, your congregation, and even your community. It's all about developing good, healthy relationships. So you had access to the Staff Parish Survival Kit. It's downloadable for you, and if you didn't have a chance to look at that beforehand, that also comes with this. So I would like to begin now with prayer, so that Lynn, let me put a big shout out, thanks to Lynn Gilbert, who's the administrative assistant in the Northern Piedmont District, for being our technical guru tonight and always. And Lynn, we couldn't thank you enough for the way you have supported us. Let's go to God in prayer. Heavenly Father, we do thank you for the privilege that is ours to be able to serve in your church. God, we ask that you would bless this time together, that we can learn more about how to support our pastors, our employees, but to also be the congregation that you have called forth to fulfill your vision for such a time as this. Help us to stay focused on the fact that that's what we're here to do, is to fulfill your vision. Lord, we thank you for Jesus Christ. It's his great commission that forms the very ground of how you want our vision to play out. His commandment, commission to us to go and make disciples of all nations. Lord, help us to focus our attention and energy around doing just that, and help us to be the disciples that he has called. We ask all this in his name. Amen. You can start now, Lynn. Thank you so much.
I'll start the video.
The chambered nautilus is one of the oldest creatures known to survive in the Earth's oceans. It is a symbol of nature's grace in growth, expansion, and renewal. It is also a symbol of order amidst chaos, as reflected in its spiral precision. As the nautilus grows, it does so in direct proportion to its needs and with geometric precision. Just like human beings, the potential for growth and renewal is always naturally present. The nautilus can be a symbol of your work on Staff Parish, in that you work together, creating growth in fulfilling the mission of the church, while also growing in your personal faith and while growing in your outreach to new people. As a member of the Staff Parish Committee, you are invited to grow deeper in your own faith through worship, Bible study, prayer, and reflection, and as the Book of Discipline states specifically, so as to give proper leadership in the responsibilities with which the committee is entrusted. People serving on this committee should be people who love their church and want to see it thrive for the kingdom of God. They should be emotionally healthy, able to keep confidences, and be willing to reflect biblically on the role and function of the church and the clergy and lay staff who seek to serve and lead the church. One of the scriptures that I think will really speak to how we're supposed to care for one another, not only in a committee, but how we relate to other people in the church, as well as people beyond our church. And I think one of the grounding scriptures for us comes from Paul's letter to the Colossians. It's Colossians 3, begins with verse 12. As God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Bear with one another, and if anyone has a complaint against another, forgive each other. Just as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. Above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in the one body. And be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Teach and admonish one another in all wisdom. And with gratitude in your hearts, sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs to God. And whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through Him. So let's just sum up. What are these key attributes that we want to be like Jesus? Love in the name of Jesus looks like compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, patience, forgiveness, peace, gratitude, singing, teaching, and admonishing. It will be important for the committee to make the time to not only read the Book of Discipline paragraphs that describe the work of the committee, but also the paragraphs that describe the purpose and function of the church. Those paragraphs are 201 through 204. The committee is asked to reflect biblically and theologically on the role and work of the pastor, which is described in paragraphs 301 to 342. Your committee will be interviewing people who feel called to licensed and ordained ministry. Your interview questions for those are found in the paragraph 310. It will be important for the committee to discuss these questions and be clear about the appropriate answers prior to interviewing a candidate. You are asked to reflect biblically and theologically on the mission of the church, its primary task, and the ministries of the church. The local church provides the most significant arena through which disciple-making occurs. It is a community of true believers under the lordship of Christ. It is the redemptive fellowship in which the Word of God is preached by persons divinely called, and the sacraments are duly administered according to Christ's own appointment. Under the discipline of the Holy Spirit, the church exists for the maintenance of worship, the edification of believers, and the redemption of the world. This all comes from paragraph 201 in the Book of Discipline. One of your several relationships is with your church's annual charge conference. You as members of the committee were elected at that charge conference through the nominating process in your church. As a part of your biblical and theological study, it's important that you look at the definition of the church, which is found in paragraph 202, and you see this on the slide here, as well as the function of the local church. It can be a temptation for churches to look inward and focus on caring for each other and using most of their time to offer programs and services to their members. But understanding the outward call of Christ on the church, as it is described in both these descriptions of purpose and function of the church, it's really important to fulfilling his calling to go and make disciples for the transformation of the world. Really, our churches should be launching sites from where we are sent out to seek and serve others in the name of Christ. And this also means that your clergy and staff cannot just serve the local church. They need to equip and train your congregation to join them in going out into the community to befriend new people, find opportunities to serve, and to offer Christ to unchurched people. Notice that it says in the conclusion of these descriptions that all of these things are so the church participates in the worldwide mission of the church, and these are all considered minimal expectations of an authentic church. Ideally, your church has done extensive work in discerning a vision for how you will live into the Great Commission from Matthew 28, verses 18 through 20, and Christ's Great Commandment from John 13. You will have clarity about how you will go and make disciples, baptizing and gladly receiving these new Christians into the life of your church, teaching them obedience to the commandments of Jesus, and living with the knowledge that Christ is always with us. Your vision describes what you will look like in your local church and community when you are out making disciples. Who will you be reaching? Whose lives will be made better because of the love and service that your church provides? How will your acts of witness and service help to transform your community and the world for the better? How will you teach the faith and its scriptures to newcomers? How will your current members be diligent about continuing to mature as disciples of Christ in your homes, your workplaces, and your community? To cast a vision, you must understand your mission. And the mission of the United Methodist Church, according to our Book of Discipline, is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. Therefore, our mission as a United Methodist Church, your mission, is already established. You don't need to spend time figuring it out. What you need to clarify, though, is your vision. And the vision is how your church can uniquely carry out the Great Commission of making disciples. This visioning demands a careful process in order to be cast accurately and to get the necessary buy-in from the leadership. This is from Bishop Bob Farr and Kay Catan in their book, Renovate or Die. From Gil Rendell and Susan Beaumont comes this great quote that I've put on the slide. It says, outcomes need to be visible. They need to help people see what is to be produced. The classic difference between a mission statement and a vision statement is that the mission describes what is to be done, which is Christ's Great Commission, while the vision statement draws a verbal picture of what the results will look like if the mission is accomplished. The verbal picture is necessary to help people have a perceptual idea of the target. It answers the question, what will it look like? As a reminder, what is the mission of the church? Matthew 28, starting at verse 16. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age. Remember that the Staff Parish has a direct relationship to your annual charge conference. These are some more of the things that you need to bring to that time together. It is possible that when the size of the employed staff of the charge makes it desirable, that you can establish a personnel committee. You are to educate the church community on the value of diversity of selection in clergy and lay staff and develop a commitment to the same. If there are people who have presented themselves for credentialing as lay preachers, persons for candidacy for ordained ministry, these names must be submitted to your annual charge conference gathering. You are to also recognize and refer to the General Board of Global Ministries persons for candidacy for missionary service. And you are to provide a list of students from the charge who are preparing for ordained ministry, diaconal ministry, and/or missionary service. These people will all need to be approved by your annual charge conference. Another relationship that you have as a committee is to your church's council. The things that you're going to recommend to them include these. You're going to be recommending the professional and other staff positions that are needed to carry out the work of your church or charge. These could be full-time, part-time, or contract workers. You need a written policy and procedures regarding the process for hiring, contracting, evaluating, promoting, retiring, and dismissing staff, personnel who are not subject to episcopal appointment as ordained clergy. You need a provision for adequate health and life insurance and severance pay for all lay employees. You should provide 100% vested pension benefits of at least 3% of compensation for lay employees of the local church who work at least 1,040 hours per year, are at least 21 years of age, and have at least 1 year of permanent service.
Every Staff Parish Relations Committee and pastors want the same things: high-quality ministry, engaged, positive staff, and a simple process in hiring, goal setting, and accountability. The need to build a cohesive team that actively engages laity and advances the mission and vision of your church, all the while being compliant, requires more than a wish. You need a system. What if you had such a system in hand? The STAR Team hiring system is designed to help you in 5 key areas: job evaluation and description, comprehensive hiring process, competency-based interviews, trust but verified checking, and goals and performance coaching. Learning how to build your team and hire the right people for the mission and your vision reduces the interpersonal conflicts that derail ministry work today. Few of us have training in current effective hiring processes. Many of our job descriptions have changed little since the 1940s. They still focus on tasks rather than results. We tend to hire people we like rather than interview for demonstrable skills needed to advance our vision. For the past several decades, working on teams has become a norm in business, religious groups, and nonprofits. Yet, we don't define and hire for both our team and position competencies within the church. Defining and hiring for those skills will build your team and drive your vision results. So exactly what are competencies? You can see a few examples on the slide here. In the past, these have been dismissed as soft skills. Yet, decades of human resource studies have found the most effective employees and leaders have well-developed competencies in a variety of areas. Team members use their talents to engage others, create opportunities, and gain great results as a part of your team in their position. Emotional intelligence, known as EQ, has been shown to be more important than experience, education, or even drive. The best news is that you can build a team around these competencies and include specific skills unique to each position. This creates measurable and definable goals for you to hire towards every time in every position. Ministry work involves hiring people. Therefore, if you're in ministry, you have made a bad hire sometime, somewhere. In a lot of cases, the candidate read you and what you liked, then molded themselves around that, causing you to select them. However, if you determine the skills needed to be an effective team and the skills for a given position, you measure your applicants against that standard. This lets you compare candidates evenly in a fair setting. Still, the single greatest predictor of future success remains past performance. When we interview people, we must seek to learn what they've achieved using their skills, not what they want or hope to do in the future. All employers, big or small, learn this selection funnel. Just because someone applies doesn't mean you owe them an interview. Even in tough hiring times, volunteer resumes and submissions need to be studied carefully. While the great candidate can show up on your doorstep once in a while, often there are other motives involved. And if you are open to hiring church members, be sure they go through your selection process like any other candidate. I also recommend you take the time to visit with them personally if they are not your final selection. While it is a hard conversation, it is the right thing to do. In today's world, it is important to have a plan for your interview process. Competency-based interviewing uses a panel system of asking predetermined questions to all candidates. While follow-up questions can vary, the format does not. Having this standardized process goes a long way in defense of your hiring systems should you ever be charged with any discrimination violation by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Lest you think churches are exempt, they are not. There is a growing list of cases won by the EEOC against churches on a variety of charges throughout the country. As a part of the Safe Sanctuary certification, it is imperative to measure what you know about your candidate versus what is actually known. This step is incredibly important and should never be left out or put aside. Failure to exercise due diligence puts the safety and welfare of parishioners, children, finances, and your community reputation in jeopardy. It could literally cause a church to shutter its doors because it cannot survive hiring someone who should never have been offered the position. Less than 2 miles from where I live, a church's 5-star daycare was shut down permanently when child abuse allegations were proven against a worker who was a close relative of the director and hired to work in that setting. Getting reference checks has always been difficult, which means it often doesn't get done at all. Candidates know this and can hide behind the "I don't want my current employer contacted" phrase. One way to do this is by telling your candidate to get the references and their contact information to you. Then you use a structured telephone interview format to cover all the team and position skills you are seeking. Reference checks are critical. If done properly, you will have a clearer picture of how your candidate works with others and achieves goals. Believe me, when you ask their references the right questions, you will learn the truth. Each church's ministry team wants to do good work. An essential part of staff goal setting is to tie the mission and vision of the church into their work goals. Too often we hire team members to do ministry without evaluating the process or the results. The process must include engagement of laity in ministry mission work, and the results must be identified and measured. Ministry is connectional, not only externally towards the community, but internally. One way to stop ministry by staff is by engaging the laity as a part of their discipleship growth. This team exercise forum helps every team member see their work as a part of the Great Commission done through the lens of your church's vision. Few of us can write high-quality, achievable goals. yet it is a skill that can be learned using this pattern. Goals developed in the SMART style not only benefit the mission of any organization, but create synergy between the team member and their manager. When goals are written with each of these elements in place, all parties are in alignment. The organization and the leaders provide needed support, and the team member must focus on the steps needed to achieve their goals. When the inevitable challenges arise, they work together to remove roadblocks or rework the goal itself. Leaders and team members stay in touch about each goal on a regular basis, as well as during their regularly scheduled checkup reviews. Many of us have endured the quarterly review system used in the business world. For both team members and their leaders, it seems there is insufficient time to achieve meaningful results. Then, when you try to do this with the church season calendar, it doesn't fit at all. When the model doesn't fit, it doesn't get done. Instead, what if we change the model to work more closely with our church calendar? Consider setting your annual goals in the fall of the year, with a review in January and another in May, and then having your annual review in late September, early October. This provides a 4-month time frame around the Advent Christmas, the Lent Easter seasons, as well as the summer ordinary time. This cycle has a natural downtime at the end of each period, which is ideal for reflection and review. Submitting your annual recommendations to the Finance Committee before November will certainly turn heads and give them plenty of time to work them into next year's budget. This definition of an annual performance review requires several conditions to be in place to be effective. First, you have established agreed upon goals between a team member and their leader. Second, there is a systematic process in place to review which keeps it professional, fair, and appropriate. Third, there is the opportunity to share feedback and provide guidance for every team member. And fourth, it is an opportunity to reinforce the team and organizational values and expectations while assessing future potential and capacity. Your fair and consistent review process documents performance and provides the basis for future employment and raises. This is a critical part of the necessary documentation for actions by the Staff Parish Committee. Hiring, managing, coaching, and supporting our teams requires commitment to a system and appropriate processes. Top talent enjoys working on a fully committed team with an organization dedicated to supporting mutually agreed upon ministry goals. We must seek to hire the best we can afford while providing the opportunity and support for the team to meet their goals. As leaders in our church, we stand accountable for our work before the Lord. Let us commit to doing our best.
Throughout this webinar, we've been emphasizing that you have relationships with different groups in the church, but none more important really than cultivating the relationship that you have with your clergy and staff. We want to encourage you to follow these directions from the Book of Discipline, that your role is to encourage, strengthen, nurture, support, and respect the pastor or pastors and staff and their families. One of your crucial roles is to promote unity in your church and to interpret the nature and function of the ministry. That's why we reference here for your review paragraphs 301 to 336 in the Book of Discipline. It would be a good centering place of discussion for you to have as a committee as you understand the nature and function of the ministry of the church. In your work with your clergy and staff, communication is going to be essential. You are to confer with them, consult and counsel them on matters pertaining to priorities and the use of their gifts, skills, and time and priorities for the demands and effectiveness of the mission and ministry of the congregation. Yearly, you're going to be providing evaluation, and identify with them continuing education needs and what the plans will be for those. And you're going to communicate and interpret to the congregation the nature and function of ministry of the United Methodist Church regarding open itinerancy, the preparation for ordained ministry, and the Ministerial Education Fund. An important relationship that your committee has is also with your district superintendent. At least the chair should reach out and get to know the district superintendent. Remember, too, that your district superintendent is always available to receive questions from you, and you should keep that dialogue open. If it turns out that you or your pastor has decided that it is time for a change in the pastoral position, then this is certainly the time that you must let your district superintendent know that, and the district superintendent will set a time to do a consultation with your committee. Please update your church's profile to get ready for that, and understand that while you will give the district superintendent your list of things that you are looking for in a new pastor, and you'll have a thorough discussion, the final decision is still up to the bishop and the cabinet as to how an appointment will or will not be made. Sometimes as a staff parish committee, we don't always think about the fact that we have a relationship to our community that includes obedience to civil and federal laws. And yet these civil and federal laws do pertain to our employed staff. And it's important that we stay current about what those laws and policies or professional standards might be. We also need to then interpret those to the people that we hire. If there are educational or training opportunities in this arena offered by the conference or the district, then I encourage your committee to take advantage of that. Hello and welcome to this webinar on the ministry and the responsibilities of your church's Staff Parish Relations Committee. I'm Nancy Rankin, and I'll be joined by my friend Bonnie Burkett, and we'll tell you more about us later. But for now, I first and most want to say thank you for saying yes to your church's nomination to serve in this way. As you partner with your pastor, and perhaps it's pastors, you may have more than one, your lay staff, and your contract workers, you have the amazing opportunity to step closer to fulfilling your church's mission to follow Jesus, make disciples for the transformation of the world. And just as you're partnering with your pastors and your lay staff, perhaps contract workers, you're also going to be partnering with multiple groups in your church. It will be important to nurture and care for those kinds of relationships. Those groups include candidates for ministry, the finance, the trustees, the church council, and the charge conference. You'll also be partnering with your district superintendent and your bishop. And you partner with your community in abiding by civil and federal law, but also through your support of missions and ministry in the community. Cultivating these partner relationships will make all the difference in your church's health and effectiveness. Let me introduce my friend Greg Huffman, who is of counsel to Patrick Harper and Dixon in Hickory. His practice concentrates in corporate law and transactions, commercial real estate, marketing and advertising matters, e-commerce, international trade, intellectual property, and representing religious organizations and nonprofits. He previously served as Vice President Legal for international apparel company Gildan Activewear, where he managed their legal functions in the United States, Asia, and Mexico. In private practice, he has represented banks, lifestyle brands, medical device manufacturers and insurance companies, tobacco companies, and institutions in a wide variety of matters. But especially for our interest today, since 2016, Greg has served as the Chancellor of the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church.
He is married to Lori Beth Huffman, who also is an elder in the United Methodist Church. Greg is a graduate of the Norman Adrian Wiggins School of Law from Campbell University, and his undergraduate degree is from NC State. We are glad to have him enter into a conversation with us today. It's my pleasure to introduce my friend Bonnie Burkett. She recently retired from being a State Farm insurance agency owner after a 44-year career. She began her career in fire claims, then moved into human resources as a regional recruiter and human resource associate manager. Then she opened her State Farm agency. She also serves as a certified lay servant in the Northern Piedmont District, where she also is the lay servant training director. Each year, she leads a faculty of 25 lay and clergy teaching volunteers for our district with a focus on engaging interpersonal training and fellowship. In addition, she plays the electric bass in the Crosswalk Band at Oak Ridge United Methodist Church. And along the way, she chaired the Staff Parish Relations Committee there, where she instituted a successful process for hiring top candidates. This is the comprehensive STAR team hiring and team coaching system that she uses in training churches throughout our conference. She earned her BA in history from Erskine College, did graduate studies at the University of Virginia. And among her favorite service club presentations is one titled Operation Recognition. This program helps families learn about, preserve, and display the service awards of their veteran family members. As an Air Force officer's daughter, it is close to her heart. She's married to David Wasserbohr, a semi-retired graphic designer and digital photographer. They have one grown daughter who is also a UX designer, back for a national buy now, pay later software company. Bonnie published her first book, Enough, The College Cost Crisis, How to Protect Your Wallet and Your Students' Financial Future, and this was published in March of 2020. It's been a joy to work with her on this webinar, and we hope it is a gift to you.
It is a great joy today to introduce to you my good friend, Reverend Dr. Nancy B. Rankin, who is an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church and a certified coach through ICF International Coach Federation. She has experience in coaching pastors, district superintendents, and congregational groups of laity. Nancy has been a pastor of small to large churches in her 35 years of ministry. Her last two churches had over 1,000 members. She served as the conference director of congregational development, overseeing church revitalization, new church starts, and witness ministries. She currently is the Western North Carolina Conference Transformation Journey Coordinator, which is a church revitalization process. She served 2 separate terms as a district superintendent, and she has written Checking Vital Signs, Assessing Your Local Church Potential with Reverend Beverly Copley, and Choosing the Faithful Path with Reverend Beth Chrisman. She coaches clients through personal contracts and clients who are referred by the district superintendents and conference officers. In addition, Nancy is a proud parent of 2 grown children and 5 grandchildren. It is a joy and a privilege to be her friend, and I count her as a mentor.
Greg, you see common recurring legal issues in churches that could easily be addressed with a better understanding of labor laws and things like that. Please share the top 3 situations where churches can get into real trouble if they are not compliant.
Problem number 1, the lack of job descriptions. Every position needs a detailed job description, and they need to be kept current. You need to have a good, solid annual review process for every employee, even the clergy, and that needs to be followed and followed up on regularly. And finally, love offerings. Churches love to do love offerings as gifts to employees and clergy. That needs to be really a spontaneous thing this is for tax reasons, spontaneous from the congregation, doesn't need to be coming from SPRC or the church hierarchy.
North Carolina is an at-will state. That is, the employer has a wide leeway with regard to firing an employee. What are the 2 or 3 critical issues of performance documentations churches can change and be better?
The first thing is have a detailed policy manual that is kept up to date that employees have to actually follow. The second thing is don't turn an offer letter into a contract. Occasionally we see this. Instead of a simple letter that outlines the terms of employment, the church goes a step further and they end up with a really detailed document that everybody's signing. You want to make sure that any offer letter always says the person's employed at will. And then the last thing is to understand which one of your employees are subject to what's called the ministerial exception. The ministerial exception is important because certain federal and state discrimination laws do not apply to ministerial employees, but they do to non-ministerial employees. Have a policy manual. It needs to be detailed, and it needs to be followed and enforced and followed up on regularly. There needs to be a good review process for every employee annually. And don't turn an offer letter into a contract inadvertently by loading it up with a bunch of stuff and then have everybody sign it, the church and the employee. Employees don't need to be signing anything.
It's really a tough job market right now. Are background, employment, and drug screening checks really necessary? And if so, why?
They are, and reason number one, if you have safe sanctuaries policy, it should require that you do those. And there's nothing worse than having a safe sanctuaries policy and just not following. Most likely, your insurance company, if you have EPL coverage or employment practices liability coverage, is going to require that you do those kind of background checks. And finally, if you ever do have a problem, it's much better to have done your background checks and exercise reasonable care, which is a catchphrase for negligence, than not to have done it and find out on the back end that you have a massive problem.
Could you give us an easy way to determine if an employee should be classified as hourly or as an independent contractor?
The easy rule of thumb in determining whether somebody's an independent contractor is if the person is taking direction from you and supervision, and they're not setting their own schedule, and they're doing everything you tell them to do, and they don't have any other clients or customers that they do stuff for, then they're probably going to be considered an employee. And you're going to have to withhold, and you're going to have to do all that other employee stuff, and you can't 1099.
Why should each church have a planned employment process in place versus just gearing up when they have a staff opening?
Non-ministerial staff are subject to state and federal anti-discrimination laws. And what you want is a process that makes sure that you're going to be in compliance with those laws when you hire, fire, promote, or terminate, whatever else.
Why is performance documentation still needed with this being an at-will state? And how long should churches retain their employment, application, and performance records?
Just because North Carolina is an at-will state doesn't mean that non-ministerial employees can't come back later and allege some sort of discrimination in hiring or promotion or firing. So those documents historically are going to be really important for you to be able to show what you've done in the past as far as hiring, firing, what your practices have been, what your procedures have been, and that you have followed them. For most churches, I would say document retention of about 7 years is fine. That meets the IRS guidelines, especially for payroll. That I wouldn't think you really need to do that anymore.
What other concerns do you want every SPRC to address?
Probably one of the big concerns that nobody addresses these days is data protection. Churches need to protect their data, and SPRC needs to have policies in place that their staff and employees understand that regulates who has access to personal data of the congregants. Mailing lists, addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, ages, all that kind of stuff needs to have limited access, and those policies need to be enforced. There are various laws in different states and in North Carolina regarding data breach and data access people need to understand.
Thanks, Greg. Can you tell me more?
Crisis management have a plan. Have a plan that outlines communications. If something bad happens, if there's an accident, if there's a death, if there's a fire, whatever, but know who is communicating, who the point people are, and what those channels of communication are going to look like. That's really important for your church to have.
One of the subjects that we sometimes like to avoid, especially in church, is the idea that we have to deal with conflict. And yet you will find in Staff Parish that there can be a lot of opportunities to confront conflict, and it can be done in a way that can have a good outcome. So it's important to encourage people to put their complaints in writing, stating facts, not vague references to they say. Let's go for accuracy. Written complaint should be signed by the one making the complaint. We really recommend that you not honor anonymous letters. Yes, you do receive concerns from people, but remember that you do not have to act on every concern you receive. Use your collective discernment and consider the source. Certainly you can acknowledge that you received it, but any action that you feel like you need to take, you need to carefully consider. An important thing to remember is that it is not your pastor's job to make everyone happy. In fact, can anybody really do that? Do not be encouraged or be swayed by petitions or surveys. One of the problems is that many times people can fill those out anonymously. You can't check the source, and it is not the way that we make decisions regarding pastoral appointments. Many of the concerns that are brought to your committee can often be resolved between the pastor and the parishioner making a complaint. But when there is a complaint brought against a pastor that is so serious that it may involve the breaking of a law or a moral failure, then it should be written and signed by the complainant and given to the chairperson. The chairperson sends the letter to the district superintendent, who will inform the bishop, and the process will then move to their oversight. There is a difference between conflict and abuse. In recent writings, it has been highlighted that staff parish committees need to understand that there's a difference between the two. When there is conflict, pastors are often advised to be what Edwin Friedman described as the non-anxious presence. His assumption was that if the pastor remained calm in the face of conflict, he or she could help to lower the anxiety in the congregational system and thereby find a reasonable solution to the conflict. Often that will work. But some conflict crosses a line between criticism and complaint to actual verbal and emotional abuse of the clergy person and even his or her family. In these circumstances, the responsibility for resolution does not remain solely in the hands of the pastor. Gene Fowler writes in his book, Church Abuse of Clergy, If the diagnosis is church abuse of clergy, the perspective on the pastor should shift away from the pastor being viewed as one actor in the conflict or as a conflict manager, and toward the pastor seen as an abused person who is suffering. Consequently, there should be recognition that a positive resolution to the abuse is very unlikely to happen, and the first order of business should involve helping the suffering pastor. The pastor's loved ones are persons who are suffering abuse along with the pastor. The suffering cannot be ignored in any case in which the pastor has loved ones. Conflict is considered a natural occurrence among human beings, and its resolution can be an opportunity for new learning and personal growth. Peace can be restored. But when conflict turns to abusive behavior, there are no positive organization-enhancing functions inherent in church abuse. A quote from Gene Fowler in his book. So what is abuse? Well, it can be spreading lies about the pastor, threatening the pastor and his or her family, making anonymous phone calls or sending threatening or false letters about the pastor, remaining passive while the pastor is being attacked, seeking to ruin the pastor's reputation. When it reaches this level of conflict, then abuse requires the intervention of your district superintendent and bishop. Make your DS aware early in the event of suspected abuse. We've been talking about the multiple relationships that you have. Think about the Nautilus and how each chamber is added, each one whenever it's necessary, and how they're all interconnected. Well, this is another example of that. You're connected to the finance and to the trustee committees. You consult with the finance committee regarding pulpit supply. That would be paying guest pastors who come in and preach when your pastor can't be there. It's also about offering proposals for compensation of your pastor and staff, the travel expenses, policies about vacation, health and life insurance, pension, and housing allowance if you do not provide a parsonage. You're making recommendations regarding these kinds of matters to the Finance Committee and then to the Church Council. The chairperson of Staff Parish is to make an annual review of the church-owned parsonage with the chairperson of trustees or a member of trustees to assure that the house is being carefully maintained and to give immediate resolution to parsonage issues that might affect the family's health and well-being. The Book of Discipline requires the staff parish to meet at least 4 times a year. The following list on the slides can help you remember what should be covered in each quarterly meeting, which will most likely be in addition to matters that have been brought to your attention. And some of those matters may require that you meet more than 4 times a year. But at the bare bones, these quarterly meetings have these things to try to achieve. In this first quarter, January to March, it is important to do the orientation for your committee, since 1/3 of your committee membership will be people newly elected by your church's charge conference. And it's always good for all members to be reminded of their task and proper procedures. If you set goals with your pastor and staff persons for this year, then this quarter would be a good time to check in to see how those goals are being accomplished. If there has been a lack of progress on goals, the committee members can help define some specific steps that the staff person or the clergy person can take toward accomplishing those goals. Setting deadlines for taking those steps will be helpful. Ask what they need to succeed. This quarter is also a good time to make sure you are current on understanding employment and tax laws. Is your employee policy book updated? If a pastoral move is anticipated, what plans do you have for helping the pastor make a good transition and for receiving your new pastor? The conference usually has a standard evaluation instrument that they will send to the clergy and the staff parish chairperson for a particular year's use. Be sure that you and your committee members attend any offered district and/or conference training in the use of the evaluation instrument. Job descriptions need updating so that the staff person being evaluated is being evaluated by the current expectations of the job description for their position that they were hired for and that they have agreed to fulfill. The job description for your pastor is in the Book of Discipline. And if you look at paragraphs 328 through 340, you will see the various descriptions for elders and deacons and licensed pastors. Make sure your committee members have read and discussed together these paragraphs so that each is aware of the breadth and the scope of the responsibilities of your clergy leaders. At this final quarter of the year from October to December, it's a busy time in most churches. Part of the reason, of course, is because of the annual church conference. You have reports that need to be ready for that. Some of those were taken care of when you interacted with your committees on finance and trustees. But you also have to complete the budget requirements for pastoral compensation because that has to be voted on at the church conference. This is also the time to update the church profile and to complete any unfinished business that you feel that you have had during the year. It's also a good time to just reflect on the work that you've done. Do some celebrating about what has been accomplished. Thank your pastor and staff for their faithfulness. And if you are going to be looking at a move advisory, then you will want to use this time to consult with your district superintendent about when your formal consultation will occur. It can be easy in the work of staff parish to get overwhelmed with details and concerns, and they're all valid and important, but if we're not careful, we can get lost in the weeds and miss out on our focus. Remember that the focus should be the mission of the church, and the mission of the church is to follow Jesus, make disciples, transform the world. So one way to stay focused on the mission is to continually ask, how are we doing in helping our people become more Christ-like? How are we helping our people grow deeper in their relationship with Christ and serving as His disciple? How are we ministering to our community and helping to transform lives in the name of Jesus Christ? Together with our pastors and church staff, how have we made progress in each of these areas? Remember that no pastor or church staff person can do this alone. This is work we do together. We are those interconnected chambers like a nautilus that continues to add and to grow to reach people for the kingdom of God.
Hey, I know you're ready for a stretch, so feel free to get up, walk around a little bit, but we want to also get to these questions, and we've got the next 30 minutes. If we can't cover everything right now, or if we don't see a quick answer, we will follow up with you about that. So what I'd like to do is take a look in the chat. I saw a few questions coming up. Can the lay member of the annual conference who is a member of the staff parish not serving in a class rotation serve as the committee chair? I've never seen that happen. I don't see it in the discipline that it would forbid it, but if they become the chair, I think then they have to become part of the class rotation. So that's where you'd have to decide, are they going to be the lay member to annual conference, or are they going to be the chair of the committee? Never see, because there's no term limit on the lay member to conference, but you have to have a term limit on who's going to be the chair. You know, that's a 3-year process. So I'll double check that. But there was a similar question, Lynn, that you asked. Where was that other one?
I think it was right before it.
There was a question about how many lay delegates can serve at one time on SPRC. The discipline does say a lay member.
That's
That's
what I saw. And, currently we have 2 on Staff Parish. And so I just wanted to get clarification there. So it's 1. And my question about the chair, I'm currently the chair of Staff Parish. Of course, we have elections coming up. I don't have someone else that's like really eager to take on that responsibility. And I'm also the lay delegate, and that's how I'm on the committee for 2023. So I just wanted some clarification. So you're saying I should probably be in a class rotation if
you're
I'm
the
going
chair, I think you have to be.
Okay, and that's fine. I'll speak to the nominating committee and see if I can get that resolved. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for serving. And I understand it's hard to get somebody to chair. As you have seen and what we've presented, there's a lot of important things for staff parish committees to be aware of and to make sure that happen. Let's see.
Nancy, there was a early on question. Could you elaborate on the role of part-time local pastors? The Book of Discipline outlines duties of pastors. However, I was told that the description applies to full-time pastors. I was provided a description of part-time local pastors from the conference. However, there are things that are not included in the conference. There are things that are not included in the conference description that are not included. Would you provide clarity? So part-time local pastors.
If you've received a description from the conference about part-time local pastors, is that what I heard? You have received that, a description from the conference about the work of part-time local pastors?
That's what the question said. This person was provided a description.
Okay. But the question really was that there was a difference between what was described there and what's described in the discipline?
Yes, and I can elaborate on my question if I need to. So there's the Book of Disciplines, and then we have a part-time local pastor who's also retired. And so I was given a description from my district superintendent. So if I look at that particular description, there are things like the pastor being the chair of the, what is it now? It was nomination and personnel, nomination and whatever it is now. Like he still is the chair, but it doesn't say it in that conference description. So like if I really follow that description, then it makes it look like the pastor has less responsibility or authority than he actually does. And so
I think, I was just going to say, I think if it's not listed, doesn't mean it's not supposed to be done. The Book of Discipline clearly says the pastor is the chair of nominations, and I've never seen that be differentiated between whether or not they were full-time, part-time, or serving as a retired pastor in a church. They're still going to chair nominations.
It's not on the description though that I was given, like from the conference. The description that I was given does not say that. It literally almost looks like they just, that it's very limited. So I wanted to know if there's a document somewhere that's more that makes this is clearer, because I have 2 of those things.
It's called the Book of Discipline is the clearer one. Any question that would come up about, and maybe they didn't write it to be exhaustive, but there would be that is in the Book of Discipline. Nobody has made that change, and they couldn't. The General Conference is the only place that can change that in the discipline. So the pastor would definitely be the chair of nominations.
So maybe I need to talk to my district superintendent again, who gave me the information. Is that what I'm hearing?
I'll talk to your DS if you want me to.
Okay.
But my point is, just because it's not in that list doesn't mean it doesn't still stand.
Yeah. No, I totally understand. But since my district superintendent gave me the information and it was different, and there were explicit differences and things that he pointed out, I was, unclear. But
I'm curious to see that, because I've never seen that kind of specificity set aside for part-time people.
I can send it to you. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. anything else from the chat box? Or we can just open it up to,
Got one. I'm looking, what should be done with an anonymous letter? I think an anonymous letter is a learning opportunity for the committee. I think an anonymous letter needs to be noted that one has occurred and that we do not do anonymous letters. And as you said, can it be destroyed? Probably should be.
Mhm.
I think that judgment makes sense. You don't need inflammatory things in print wandering around files, particularly down the road. So historically, no one should be keeping that. But I believe this is a training opportunity so that your staff parish is united in that policy of we don't deal
Mhm.
in anonymous letters.
I agree.
There's a question, and I had a little offline interaction with this person about what they were asking. Does anyone have a survey form for small church parishioners? And it was a question really about a ministry interest survey. I can't speak for the person about maybe that PPRC would do, but they're asking for a.
Sounds like a nominations.
Yeah.
Oh, is it more like a, asking where people would be interested in serving, or are there particular
Or
interest?
things they would be interested in seeing happen in their congregation, those kinds of, were kind of the questions that the person provided.
If I could elaborate on that, would it be, instead of reinventing the wheel again, is there a survey form that is being used, or does someone have a sample survey form on what it is that the parishioners would like to see in their church? Do they want to move more to a traditional? Do they want to continue with the traditional service? What is it that they're looking for in a minister? Things associated with that. What kind of a Sunday school program will spark your interest? It's a basic general survey, and I didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and I wanted to see if anybody has a sample of that.
My hesitation would be asking what they want in a minister. That's really the role of staff parish. That's a conversation for you to have as staff parish. Certainly you can have conversations with people, but to make it like the survey says, therefore this is what we must do, sometimes it's bigger than that. Making these decisions is more than just what's popular. And so when you're discerning the kind of pastor that you're looking for in a consultation with your district superintendent, again, you need to take into consideration, what have we discerned is the mission of our church, and who's going to come and help us fulfill that mission the best at such a time as this, coming out of a pandemic. Things have changed so dramatically. A lot of what we hear in the consultation work that I do is people's desire to go back to the way things used to be, when we're not going to be able to do a lot of that. So that would be my hesitation about surveys might express some longings that you would want to acknowledge and certainly understand, but at the same time, maybe not be the main reason that you make a decision. Does that make sense?
It does. And I wouldn't be guided entirely by the popularity of a survey. Just wanted to get a feel. We've had quite a transition of people in our church, and since COVID, we have never really recovered from COVID with our membership, and we're just looking for things with the new people that have come into our church to say, what is it that you want to see in this Sunday worship program? What is it that you want to see in some of our mission programs? What is it that you want to see in adult education? It's just basically trying to spark additional interest because of the effects of what COVID had on our membership. And I think there's a lot of churches throughout all of the entire country that have been faced with the same challenge. Coming back from COVID, you just didn't recover from it.
Right.
A lot of churches are 50% down in total membership. It's just an incredible thing.
Yeah, it is. One way that we've described it is that everybody is at a restart button. How do we restart? Again, I would just encourage you as a church, particularly this is part of the work of your council on ministries too, or however you're structured, if you have a single board or if you have a church council. This is great conversation to have there about who are we called to be for such a time as now? How do we need to adjust? There are processes available for churches. I'll put in a personal plug for looking online at Transformation Journey as a process for your church to look at to help you redefine what it means to go forward. And I just happen to be the coordinator for that, but I will shamelessly put in a plug for the fact that it's designed in such a way to help churches discern exactly what you're talking about.
Another question is, are sample church job descriptions available from the conference or district?
They used to be, there used to be, I'm not sure about the conference or district right now. They may have something. I know that Cokesbury did. If you have the guideline books from Cokesbury, those little pamphlets that are about each of the work areas in the church, in the back of those guideline books is usually job description things. Lynn, you know what I'm talking, you remember what I'm talking about?
Right, and there's also Cokesbury puts out a one book or upper room. You could call a district office the Northern Piedmont one, and we could tell you that, but that has a similar kind of set of stuff.
Let me add a suggestion on that. Job descriptions tend to be in layers and levels, meaning if you have a church with 3 team members, a staff of 3 versus a staff of 10, the descriptions are not going to be the same. So I would commend to you that you might look at also some very well put together churches in your district and ask if they would mind sharing their descriptions in addition to Cokesbury Upper Room options, because and you can contact your district office about who may be kind of on top of that. And I don't imagine that they would ever hesitate to help another church to give you a feel for what does your size church with your team members' responsibilities, what do those job descriptions look like at a similar place?
We often make those exact kind of referrals. Thank you, Bonnie. That's another question about the love offering. We've been collecting monies for love offerings at year end for many years. This is the first I've heard of there being risks.
In the wonderful world of editing for a webinar, sometimes you can't get every little detail in, and I can't say that we got all the reasons from Greg Huffman, but it's along the lines of this. You do not want to be publishing in the weekly newsletter, it's time to ante up for the love offering. When he said spontaneous, it means not solicited, not devised, meaning, okay, we start putting in the thing on November 15th and we stand up in front of the congregation and pass a basket the rest of the Christmas season, and Advent season. So the key to that is that there's tax issues involved. A spontaneous gift is acceptable in tax code. A solicited, a pattern of solicitation that can be proven could have tax impacts. We don't want to do that. We want to make that love gift go. So just look at how you're going about that process and minimize printable, repeatable, or videotapable solicitations. Those of you using video during your services. That's it.
I'll just add one more thing to that.
Please.
A person can give another person a gift, a spontaneous gift. A solicited thing where people are paying the money into the church and they want it on their giving record and you're writing a church check to that staff person, that's taxable income. That goes on their W-2.
And like I said, we'd like it to go 100% in love.
Another question about job descriptions for particular staff people, and we've covered that. Is there a list of specific, Bev has commented about sort of time visitation expectations for quarter, half-time, three-quarter time clergy that's available in your local office. A question about our survival kit. I'm going to put that in the chat here again, and we will send it out to everybody who registered. And if you register your attendance in the sign-in thing, if you didn't register earlier, we will get that to you again.
And the webinar and the kit are going to be made available for anybody on your staff parish to access, and of course your pastor to have
Somebody
access.
has actually put in there for me the Google Drive link. I see to the.
That's great.
We sent it out in the email to everybody who had registered. What is the process for changing the job descriptions of your church staff members? Since so many things have changed since COVID, some things may need to be added or taken away.
That actually, in my understanding, is really almost an ongoing yearly process. There should be a subcommittee of staff parish, specifically if you have a large staff parish of up to the 9, maybe 2 or 3 who are particularly good at looking at those kinds of printed jobs. And they could go through and highlight, do we need this anymore, in yellow? And then you have another column on the other side of the page going, let's add this instead. And maybe make a good goulash out of that, bring it back to staff parish for review. Once that is cooked and baked to your satisfaction, out comes a beautiful casserole. I'm just teasing. Am I hungry? I don't know. But definitely we had some people when I served who were particularly good at that. And I leaned heavily on them being able to make changes, to modify, to address, to, like you say, add or subtract. You may also, if it's an existing team member or staff person, add the consideration of their skill set or their willingness to be trained in additional skills to meet the new descriptions. Make sure that capacity is solid or the capacity for training is solid. Nothing like giving someone a new job description and that's not going to fly well. That could be a challenge. That could be a challenge. Yeah, that's what I would do. I would take what we need to take out, what we need to add in, and work it together, go through staff parish.
Well, and I also want to add, I don't know if a lot of churches really evaluate their lay staff on a yearly basis. Sometimes I think churches think, well, this person's been here for so long that we wouldn't, quite frankly, even question. And yet it's not fair to them to not be sure we're all functioning on the same page. And the fact that job descriptions sometimes do need to change, given the change that's happened in our churches. I mean, one of the new job descriptions in a lot of churches is a person who is more, it's beyond volunteer as to who runs the tech, who's going to make sure that we do live streaming, who's going to make sure that, everything is functioning. We didn't even ask those questions 2 years ago. Now we're realizing that might be the new church staff person, at least part-time. And so things have had to shift. But if you're doing an annual evaluation, you're asking the person, is this still working well for you? Is there another way we can support you? But it's also a time to say to them, we're going to need you to be able to do what? A little better, or pay more attention to this. It's just a way to be fair to people. But pastors should be evaluated every year. It's required by the conference, and they have a standard form. But we need to do it for staff people too. But it's also an opportunity to simply say, we really appreciate you. And sometimes we don't say that enough. So don't see evaluation as a negative thing, but as a way to stay current with what does the church need. I mean, I think that's one of the questions that sometimes we don't ask enough is what is it that the church needs? And the tendency sometimes can be keeping a staff person happy rather than seeing if they're doing the job the church needs.
There's a question, what was the answer concerning visitation expectations for part-time clergy?
It's a part of what pastors do, but as to how much a church is asking for and balancing that with all the other things in their job description is, again, a great conversation to have with the clergy so that you are on the same page. Because sometimes what churches will do is send a mixed message. We want you to visit every shut-in on a regular basis, perhaps even weekly. But at the same time, we want you to go out and get new members for our church. But we also want you to help us with all of our meeting structure and preach excellent sermons every week and know everybody by name. Oh, and that's part-time. So you see, you really need to sit down and say, what is it that the church needs to fulfill its mission? A lot of churches will say to pastors, we want you to grow this church, but we want you to sit in your office all day in case somebody drops by. And can the pastor grow the church by themselves? I hope you're going to say no, of course not. So I think that's, visitation is important, but define important in terms of how much is enough. And is it more around what is really needed by the person? One thing that if visitation is a high priority for your church and you have a part-time pastor, then one of the things I would ask is, can some of you help make that visitation happen? Can there be lay folk who also help with visitation of people on a regular basis? As I served larger churches, I learned pretty quickly that in larger churches, I would go from crisis to crisis. I would be doing sometimes a funeral a week. Somebody else needed to do the follow-up because I was already doing the next crisis. And so you have to adjust for those kinds of times. And they can happen in a small church where you have multiple crises in a season. And so the pastor has to be free to address those. And somebody else can also come along and help with the other. So I think that a study by your committee of all of the responsibilities that are outlined in the Book of Discipline to a pastor is important for people to realize. I've dealt with staff parishes who were surprised that there was such a broad expectation of the responsibilities of a pastor. As one said to me, I just thought y'all preached and visited. And I said, well, we're to order the life of the church. That includes all these committees. It includes not that you attend every meeting, but you have to see that it's functioning. It's outreach in the community. Who's going to equip new people and who's going to help people go out in the community and engage people in mission and ministry? There's just so much more involved. So that's a great conversation for you to have with your pastor.
Next question, for those whom staff parish is a charge, that they're two or more, are there any recommendations, tips you have for success to serve both congregations?
Well, the discipline allows for you to have a charge staff parish, but you can also have, each church can also have a staff parish that deals with just the things happening at their church. The charge staff parish deals with their life together, which would include the appointment of the pastor, because the pastor is appointed to both. I've had churches ask me, how do they divide their time between the two? And I've told people, it's like being a parent. Which child do you tend to? The one who needs you the most. And so, it's not a partialing of hours as much as it is a sensitivity to what all's going on and where am I most needed, and making sure, though, that doesn't become too one-sided. So that you can have two conversations. One, what's the best things we need to have our pastor doing, and what do we need to be doing as a charge, 2 churches or 3 churches, whatever. And then there may be specific things about your particular churches that you need to have a meeting with your pastor just about your church. And so that's in the Book of Discipline about how to kind of have a both and.
While we're at a break, I'd like to circle back one more time about evaluating your team or staff members, at least annually. Yet another reason for that positive evaluation to help with their workload, help them with new changes. Failure to evaluate, even your most knowledgeable, been there for 20 years, has a tendency to create silos. You know what I'm talking about. There's a sense that only this person can ever do this job, only this person, and sometimes they help create that cape. And so evaluation helps you get in touch with what's needed, helps you get in touch with what's wanted, and also assists you when changes have to be made to the description, such as, geez, we need a technical person to run live streaming every Sunday morning. So I just want to encourage you to take that on, even if we bumble and fumble and mumble the first couple of times. It is a great opportunity to be in touch in a positive way, but also to stop the idea that resources are critical and silos get built because no one's paying attention. When we stop seeing ourselves as part of the total team and we're off on the side doing our thing because only we can do it, that tends to not go well with the rest of the ministry work together. So
That's a really good
comment on that.
That's a really good word. And you heard Greg Huffman talk about churches having a policy handbook. Those are available from other churches. Lynn, again, for the Northern Piedmont, but any district office, I'm sure that churches that have a policy handbook, you could take a look at that. What that does is make sure you're treating everybody fairly, and it is clear about how will we hire people, how will we interview, what is the process for firing a lay employee if we have to do that. Because if you aren't consistent in the way that you handle people, then you set yourself up for liability. So the policy is another thing to keep updated, just like you do your updating of job descriptions. Take a look at that policy, and that policy book is something that your lay employees should all read and say, I have read this, and agree to follow it. It just keeps, particularly when Staff Parish rotates, people come in new, that policy book is there to catch everybody up, that this is how we do it. So if you've not done that, that'd be a great thing to do this year. Yes, ma'am.
There's a question of what is a good number of members on the SPRC committee?
Well, the Book of Discipline says between 5 and 9, plus your lay member to annual conference and your lay leader. But with single board governance now, some of you might be single board structure. You're not going to have 9 people doing Staff Parish. The way single board usually works, I think it's around 3 to 5. How many of you are doing single board? So that might be different, but normally it's a minimum of 5 up to 9, plus the pastor, any pastor who's under appointment there, the lay member to annual conference or members, if you have more than one, and your lay leader.
Let me circle back real quick on that policy handbook. Well done, well kept up, reviewed annually, reviewed by your team annually and signed off on, is a marvelous tool. It's your guidebook. If it sits on this shelf and gathers dust and gets age on it, it does not age well. It is also can be a weapon when someone complains against you legally. If they point to a policy book that you haven't changed, operated with, or dealt with in a decade, that's going to be trouble. So just do it. I can't say it enough. Do it very well if you're going to have one.
Well, and the same, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, same thing about Safe Sanctuary. We're required, most of us by our insurance, our churches are required to have the Safe Sanctuary policy. But like Greg Huffman said, having the policy is one thing, following it is another. And there again, that's where it can really hurt you if you have it and you haven't abided by it. So can't emphasize that enough. Let me, we're at the top of the hour. I thank you. It's been a long haul, and I appreciate your attentiveness. If you have other questions, you can certainly send them to Bonnie or to me or both of us. It's been our privilege to try to prepare something that we hope is ongoing for you, not a resource that if you missed the training, you missed it, but a resource that stays with you with the webinar and the survival kit. And we intend to update the kit on a regular basis. So we hope that it will continue to be a live document, as well as the webinar will help you.
Let us know how we can help you individually, collectively. That is the brilliance of the United Methodist Connection. We are here not only to serve our Lord, but we are here to be supportive of one another in each other's ministry gifts. So let me promise you, we'd love to help in any way we can.
Thank you all for coming tonight. God bless.
Thank you.
We are going to
Good
leave the
night.
webinar